Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Charlotte Brontë. Happy birthday to you. Hello, everyone. This is Audrey, and as you can see, today is the 209th birthday of Charlotte Brontë, an English novelist whom you may recognize as the author of Jane Eyre, which is an icon of the Bildungsroman, Gothic novels, British or Victorian literature, and one of my favorite books of all time. Jane Eyre has been adapted for the screen several times, and today I want to share with you some adaptations of Jane Eyre that I have watched. A quick note before I begin is that this video does contain spoilers about the story, so if you haven't read Charlotte Bronte's novel, pause this video, read Jane Eyre, and then come back. Or don't just read Jane Eyre. Listen to the audio recording that is read by Tandy Newton. She is an amazing voice actress, and her delivery of the story was infused with so much love for Bronte's work that I caught it, and now Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books of all time. We are going to be looking at 7 adaptations from the years 1943, 1973, 1983, 1996, 1997, 2006, and 2011. I'm going to save the overall merit of these adaptations for last. Before that, I want to rank some posters and some portrayals by actors. What makes a good movie poster? It should grab the viewer's attention, give them a hint as to what the movie is about, and keep in mind the main focus of the story and not have anything that could be distracting the viewer's eye. So where did these posters fail in promoting Jane Eyre? 5th place is from 2011. This one's fine overall. You've got woods in the background, Jane and Rochester showing the foreground, but they're touching noses in a way that's really awkward, and that's why I put it on this list. 4th place is A Lover Turned Nightmare from 1997. I like this poster overall. I like the way Jane is standing in the foreground, staring into the distance, imposing Thornfield in the back. But I find Mr. Rochester's face in the sky to be really distracting. I get why they would do it for story purposes, but from a viewer's perspective, you're just wondering, why is it there? I don't like it. 3rd place is from 2011. And it's trying to make Jane sort of a fangirl of Mr. Rochester. I just cannot stand his face on her dress. And this poster overall, with the plain background and the way Jane is posing, just makes it look more like a photo shoot than a movie shot. Our runner-up is from 1983, and was clearly designed by some fanboy or fangirl of Mr. Rochester's. You can see here, Rochester's all the way up in the foreground, right underneath Jane's name, and Jane herself is running in the background. This poster would have been great if Brontë had chosen to write Jane Eyre with Mr. Rochester as the narrator. And so this poster would then give the clue to the audience that this man is the one we're going to be interacting with throughout the series. And we're going to see everything through his eyes, and Jane in the background would convey that he's always thinking about her. But that's not how Brontë wrote the story. She wrote it to have Jane be the narrator as well as the title character, and so this poster really messes up the focus. Our most cringeworthy poster is from 1997. I mean, there's nothing here that jumps out at you as being like, why is that there when you first look at it? I mean, you've got the furniture and Mr. Rochester, and yes, this is Jane Eyre, so wait. Rochester, but are you sure this is Jane Eyre? Because I don't see Jane herself. Come on. The first character portrayal we're going to be looking at is that of St. John Rivers. This one was suggested by my brother, who really likes this character. St. John is the most complex character in the book. I feel you can interpret him as either a likable man whom you can admire for his zeal to the gospel and his missionary work. He's just very stoic, and that's why it's kind of hard to get past that. Or you can portray him as a self-righteous prig who doesn't understand love. So to rank this list effectively, we're going to be looking at actors who've given very likable St. Johns to very obnoxious St. Johns. Seventh place is John Sutton from 1943. The real reason I ranked him last is because he's actually a new character called Dr. Rivers, who replaces the characters of St. John and Miss Temple. Sixth place is Rupert Penry Jones from 1997. Hard to tell from this photo, but he actually smiles a lot in the movie. And in the book, St. John's very stoic. I also can't tell if Penry Jones's St. John is a clergyman because I don't think he dresses like one, and I don't remember him talking much about having his own church. And he's just so genuine and has such faith in Jane's abilities, and he clearly takes genuine pride in her and trusts her, that I could have seen him being a great husband for her. And obviously, you don't want that if you're trying to be faithful to the book, because then you're going to be like, Jane, why are you ditching this wonderful man who's closer to you in age for your older, moody employer who's been lying to you for who knows how long? Fifth place is 2011's Jamie Bell. His St. John is a lot more serious than Rupert Penry Jones is, but again, he's very genuine, and I could have seen him being a great husband for Jane. And it seems Bell and the filmmakers tried to rectify that at the very end by having him snap at Jane, and the last we see of him is him yelling at Jane as she turns him down because she's still thinking of Rochester and she doesn't love St. John. And I just feel like, okay, we're parting with St. John on a sour note after he's been so likable in the movie. Fourth place is Samuel West from 1996. I think he looks the most like the character of all the actors I've watched. He's got blonde curls and he's very serious but driven. You can tell he's restless and ambitious just from the way he moves because he doesn't talk that much. And so I liked him from the little I saw of him, but the movie doesn't give him a lot of attention or take much time to develop the relationship between him and Jane. And so it was hard for me to tell whether he was going to turn out to be someone who could be a great spouse or someone who would not have been right for Jane. Third place is Andrew Buchan from 2006. I think his St. John is the closest to how I would have the character portrayed if I were adapting this book, where you can like him, but he's clearly not the husband that Jane is meant to marry. And he's ambitious and commanding. My favorite example of this is when he sees Jane learning German and then he plops a bunch of language books on her lap and says, "We're going to begin learning a new language tomorrow." And she's just looking at him like, "What?" But he started to crack a bit when he was talking about how he does love Rosamond, but he feels he can't marry her because he's called to be a missionary and that would not be the right life for Rosamond. And so it's kind of up for debate whether he should be cracking over that. I personally think he shouldn't, because in the book, he outright says, "I scorn this weakness." Our runner-up is Geoffrey Whitehead from 1973. I think he did a great job of capturing the spiritual side of St. John Rivers, but he's clearly too old for this character, and he has this really strange way of talking. He always talks in a sort of rhythm that's very forward, but he manages to be very stoic. But then he has this random burst of emotion when he proposes to Jane. The most obnoxious St. John came 10 years later with Andrew Bicknell in 1983. His portrayal is so self-righteous. You can clearly just see it. It just permeates it. But you also get this impression from watching him that St. John himself doesn't realize this flaw of his. And so you can understand where he's coming from, but you're watching it and thinking, "Oh, Jane, please, please, please do not marry this man." And this brings me to our next character portrayal, Mr. Edward Fairfax Rochester. I think his character is easier to analyze than St. John's. We know he's very imperious, romantic, hot-tempered. He's had a very depressing past. So this is just going to be a list of the worst Rochesters to the best Rochesters. Seventh place is Orson Welles from 1943. I get it. A lot of people who've watched 43 love him, but I watched 43 at a time when I was in a mindset of I have a vision of how I think Jane Eyre should be adapted, and in particular, I have a set vision for Rochester. Wells is really good at being surly, but he could come across as a little spaced out sometimes. His eyes would just dart to the side, and he seemed to be staring into the distance when he was talking to Jane. and his voice could be monotone when he was expressing deep emotion. And when Jane breaks up with him, all he does is meet her on the staircase and go, "Please, Jane, I was 19 when I married my wife. I had no idea what I was doing. Please just stay." And Jane's like, "Have you no respect for yourself?" and just walks off. And instead of breaking down, he just stands there going, "Jane, Jane, Jane." And I'm thinking, looking back on it, Mr. Rochester, in this scene, you're supposed to be feeling like you're about to lose everything. Your life's going to completely fall apart if Jane leaves you. And Wells just did not capture that. Sixth place is Ciaran Hinds from 1997. I thought his portrayal was believable overall. He's sarcastic and brusque, and he has these nice moments where he smiles at Jane. And he's actually pretty nice to Adele. He lets her give him kisses. And when he tells Adele she can't go shopping with him and Jane, he says, "I will bring you back a present though." And I'm like, oh, that's nice. But part of this is also just the fact that he and the actress he was paired with, their chemistry just wasn't that strong. I get it, there's a really big age gap between them. And he messed up the breakup scene, as I like to call the scene where Jane says, "I must leave you." Ciaran Hinds just grabs Jane's bag, throws it down the stairs, tells her she wasn't really in love with him, but she was just in love with the idea of being his wife, being the mistress of Thornfield. And I just laugh every time I watch it because his acting in that scene, not quite what you wanted. Fifth place is William Hurt from 1996. I watched him expecting him to give a more pensive portrayal of Rochester, so I wasn't super disappointed with his performance. In fact, I had these nice surprises, particularly during the wedding scene. When he takes them to meet Bertha in the attic, his voice rises and his temper starts to mount as he gives his whole backstory. And I'm thinking, ooh, yeah. But he's not the Rochester in the book, so I put him fifth. Fourth place is Michael Jaston from 1973. He did a very great job overall working with Bronte's original writing because he had to work with the most of it compared to the other six actors I've watched. And Rochester in particular is no easy feat. The way he talks is basically a bunch of abstract and theatrical rants. So it's hard to make those sound natural. And he can be very imperious and teasing, two key qualities of Rochester. And he's actually a decent singer because in the book, Rochester is described as having a fine singing voice and even sings for Miss Ingram. But his acting was a bit stilted at times. For example, in the end, I was trying to rewatch it one time and I just couldn't get through it because the acting just felt so fake and unnatural. And part of me is just looking at this photo of him and thinking he looks a little pale for the character. Just, the light brown hair and all that. I guess maybe I think Rochester makes sense to have the black hair and the dark brows and all that because he's very fiery and moody, etc. And so I get in part why casting directors look for people who resemble the character a bit better and I prefer when Rochester actually has black hair. Third place is Toby Stephens from 2006. I usually picture him whenever I'm reading Jane Eyre. I think he looks the most like Mr. Rochester. His portrayal is very mercurial and sarcastic. Again, two prominent qualities of Rochester. And he could also be very playful with Jane. And sometimes I wonder if he was almost a little too nice. He looks genuinely concerned when Jane is crying right before he proposes to her, and she tells him she wishes she'd never been born because she can't bear to leave Thornfield. And I mean, it's up for debate because she even calls Rochester the best person I know. And so you can give the sense of, oh, he's genuinely concerned. Like, when has anyone ever taken that worry for Jane Eyre? But at the same time, I also think he's been purposely feigning courtship of Miss Ingram to try to arouse Jane's jealousy. So I still think he should have this inward smugness about him that everything seems to be working out as he planned. Our runner-up is Michael Fassbender from 2011. My opinion of his portrayal drastically changed with viewing one and viewing two. I had high expectations the first time I watched him and was disappointed because, again, I had that set vision of how I wanted Rochester portrayed. But after my vision was met, I went back and watched this movie again and realized Michael Fassbender's actually an amazing Mr. Rochester. He does a great job of keeping Rochester Victorian, working with some of Bronte's original dialogue, but also managing to give the character a more modern edge that can help him connect better with a modern audience who may have trouble with Victorian writing. And he does a great job of physically embodying the character, even more so than my top Rochester. Michael Fassbender walks with a bit of a swing with his arms, and he's got this very upright stance, and he has got this vigor to his movements. And Rochester is a very strong, athletic man, and Fassbender really captures that aspect of the character more than I think the other actors did. And he is so good with the wedding to breakup sequence, like his facial expressions, everything. He just lunges at Mason, grabs him in a chokehold. He seems to be the chokehold Rochester because he also holds Jane in a bit of a chokehold when he's begging her to stay and she says no. But my two critiques are he sometimes sounded like he was just reciting his lines rather than actually putting the right emotion into them. And I sometimes wonder if he was a bit too restrained with his emotions or could come across as too aloof or cold. The best Mr. Rochester, in my opinion, is 1983's Timothy Dalton. As you probably can guess, he was the actor who met my vision for Mr. Rochester. He worked with a ton of Bronte's original dialogue. He can be very imperious, yet very endearing, and very mercurial. And he's not afraid to outright cry and break down. He focused more on using his face and voice than physically embodying the character, in my opinion, but Timothy Dalton's great with facial expressions and voice use. And two minor things I would critique are one, it's kind of up for debate to me whether he messed up the breakup scene at the end. He's sort of just shouting at Jane. I mean, he's trying to be emotional and it's hard. And when he breaks down crying as Jane walks out of the room, sometimes it can sound a tiny bit like he's laughing and he yells at Jane that she will give him her love as she walks up the stairs. So I feel like you can interpret it either as, ooh, well done, because Rochester's so desperate, he's totally losing all control. But it can also sound like he's over the top or juvenile. Let me know what you think. And also, his eyes tend to dart toward the camera at some points. And so it seems like he's losing focus or breaking character. Of course, we have to rank Jane Eyre herself. This is also going to be merely a ranking of the worst Janes to the best Janes. Seventh place is Charlotte Gainsbourg from 1996. She's got this quiet dignity and grace about her, the way she carries herself and the way she walks. But her performance just feels very flat and expressionless. She kind of has this face you see the whole movie, with the exception of a few smiles. And the most emotion we ever get out of her is the proposal scene when she is tearing up a tiny bit and she's more just shouting at Rochester and calling him stupid. Sixth place is Samantha Morton from 1997. I really like the interactions between her and Adele. She does smile a lot with Adele. And she handled the breakup scene well, because if you're keeping track of the years and the actors, she got paired with Ciara Hinds, who's yelling at her the whole time, but she manages to hold it together while expressing the emotion and the heartbreak she's feeling, but also this sense of, I'm going to stick to my principles, cost me what it may. But her Jane was too blunt and seemed to lack tact, especially with Mr. Rochester. One example is after she saves him from the fire, she recalls how earlier that day he described Adele's mother as his great passion. And Jane calls him out for Grace Poole, maybe setting the fire, and she says, "Why is she here? Is she another one of your great passions?" And I'm thinking, Jane, you don't say that to anyone. much less do you say that to your employer. And after she leaves his room, she has this frightened look on his face, and I'm thinking, is she frightened of falling in love? Sorry, afraid of falling in love. Fifth place is Joan Fontaine from 1943. Her performance manages to be subdued without being wooden, and I think she manages this by using her face super well. She'll often tear up, and the proposal scene, from what I remember, again, it's been a long time since I've watched this adaptation. I think it's the first time she actually speaks out for herself. Before she'd spoken out for Adele. And so when she says, "Do you think because I'm poor and obscure and plain and little?" That really struck me. I was like, wow, now she's finally being honest, not honest, but, you know, confiding in a way in Rochester and speaking up for herself. But you can see her hair is very modern here. And Jane is a plain character, and Fontaine's really pretty. Fourth place is Sorcha Cusack from 1973. She had to do a lot of voiceover narration in this miniseries she was in, and she has a nice voice for it, and she's really sweet in the scene she has with Adele. But she can come across as very confident or witty at times, and sometimes I thought she was too smiley and confident with Rochester, especially like right off the bat. And I found her acting a bit stilted, especially toward the end of the series. Third place is Mia Wasikowska from 2011. She plays Jane with this naive edge to her, which I think Jane should have because she spent 8 years of her life in a boarding school, and so she would be pretty ignorant of the world. And she used a Yorkshire accent rather than the received pronunciation that we are accustomed to when we hear British accents or think of a British accent. But I wonder if her Jane was a bit too serious. I get why Wasikowska portrayed Jane Eyre this way because the character has had a very tough life of it. But I think she could have been happier in certain scenes. And sometimes she cried in the wrong places. I feel she should have broken down a tiny bit more when she breaks up with Rochester. But instead, she sort of just sniffles a bunch and sniffles as she's running out of Thornfield, and then she waits until she collapses in the middle of the field to break down. So it's kind of up for debate the degree of crying she chose in certain places. A runner-up is Zayla Clark from 1983. She's got this sweetness about her that just really endears you to her. And like Cusick, she had to do some voiceover narration in the series, and she has a really nice voice for that. And she has this great blend of being serious and merry. And I just think she's also really good at conveying things with her face, especially during the scene where Rochester says, "Oh, you've noticed my penchant for Miss Ingram. If I marry her, don't you think she'll regenerate me with a vengeance?" But I think she needed more emotion in the scenes that were more intense, such as the proposal scene, because in that scene, Jane feels like she's about to lose everything, so she should have been more devastated. And during the breakup scene, again, she needs to feel devastated because she knows it's for real. She is going to lose everything that matters to her and this man she loves. And in that scene, Clark comes across as just kind of exasperated with her employer. And I mean, Jane could have definitely had some edge of exasperation in that scene. Like, you've just been lying to me this whole time. But I think Jane's primary emotion should be anguish. Our top Jane Eyre is Ruth Wilson from 2006. She takes conveying things with her face to a next level. Her face has a voice of its own. And this is very important for the story because part of the richness in Jane Eyre is that it's basically a conversation with Jane and the reader. And Jane is inviting the reader into her mind and to basically read her thoughts. And the 2006 miniseries didn't have any voiceover narration from Jane, so Ruth Wilson really needed to up her facial expression game, and boy did she. One example that my mom and I noticed is after she puts out the fire, She goes back to her room, looks at her hand where Rochester held it, has this big smile on her face, holds her hand to her lips for a few seconds, gives it this long kiss, and then lies back down, out of breath, flushed, and with this exuberant smile. And you can just tell, oh, she's in love. And I think she just captures every aspect of Jane perfectly. She's passionate, yet principled. She's serious and confident, and yet she's got this sense of trying to find her way and still trying to figure things out. And during the proposal scene, she just went for it and wept her heart out. And I watch it every time. Every time I watch her in that scene, I'm just thinking, oh, she's so good. And another fun thing is can be really snarky with Mr. Rochester. One example is when she comes back after visiting Mrs. Reed, and Rochester says, I want my money back. You've been gone for a month. And she says, I said I would be gone for as long as I was needed. And I was. And you still owe me wages. And at the very end, when she and Rochester are talking about St. John, she says, St. John is young and he's handsome. Oh, and he's a far better Christian than ever you were. And I'm just thinking, oof. Yeah. All right, finally, we are going to look at these adaptations on their overall merit. Sixth place is 1943. Again, I haven't watched this adaptation in a while, so I don't remember it super well. I think it took a very nice look at Jane's childhood, but I thought they took too much artistic license with the story, and there was an overuse of dramatic music, or they used it in weird places, such as when Jane finds the fire in Rochester's room and she wakes him up and immediately music starts playing while they're dumping water on the bed. I just don't like it when they play loud music during that scene. It just feels kind of out of place and it makes me laugh, frankly. Fifth place is 1997. This one had nice music and a nice use of voiceover narration. And I liked some of the artistic choices they made, especially with how they showed the guests at Thornfield Hall. And this one actually stressed more of the Christian themes in the story. For example, when Jane is talking about the hypocrisy of Brocklehurst, and she says, however, I did read the Bible and have since found my own faith in the Lord. And it included scenes often cut in films, such as Jane's veil getting ripped up. And I always like it when they show a series of scenes that show the passage of time during Rochester's engagement, because not only does it convey this tenderness and this growing bond between them, but it can also serve to pack more of that emotional, heartbreaking punch for Jane and the audience once Rochester's secret is revealed. But this film did feel very rushed, especially toward the end. I mean, films always tend to get rushed toward the end. They cut out Mrs. Reed's death, and the chemistry between Samantha Morton and Ciara Hinds just wasn't super strong. I mean, they're great actors, but yeah. Fourth place is 1996. The score and cinematography give this movie a very dreamy feel, and I really like the way they did Jane's childhood, especially the way the character of Miss Temple was included. She's very prominent. But like 43, this adaptation took too much artistic license with the story, especially with the way Jane's connection with the Rivers is. And it just lacks the fire and the emotional intensity that I think is necessary for this story. For example, when Jane breaks up with Rochester, after that, in the book, she has this dramatic wandering the moors for 3 days trying to find work, getting none. But all Jane does is ride a carriage back to Gateshead Hall, where she first met the Riverses because they were caring for her dying aunt. Third place is 2006. This is a 4-part miniseries. It does the most to develop the relationship between Jane and Rochester. And this one has music a lot more than the other 2 miniseries on this list. They have some interesting flashbacks at the beginning of episode 4, because episode 3, the last thing you see is Jane into her room after their wedding's been interrupted, and she removes her bridal apparel, puts on her regular dress, and she's just trying to take it all in. And then episode 4 starts with her wandering the moors. And as she's trying to recover with the Riverses, she has all these flashbacks to what happened afterward and how she got to this place. But there were some parts to this series that I found a little iffy, with the way they handled Bertha's infidelity, the breakup scene, and then at the very end, the way Rochester proposes again. Ugh. And they did rush through her childhood. But this miniseries has the best final scene of all the adaptations I've watched. It ends with Jane gathering her whole family for a portrait session, not just Rochester and her children, but also Diane and Mary Rivers and their husbands. Adele returns. And it gives you this sense of Jane is no longer an isolated and rejected young woman, but she's now someone who has a family she can love and who loves her too. Our runner-up is the 1973 miniseries. This is a 5-part adaptation of Jane Eyre. I really liked the flow, and I think they did a great job figuring out where to stop one episode and where to start the other. And this one also has an engagement period that I really like. In this one, it's Jane trying on her wedding dress and having a nice conversation with Rochester after her veil gets ripped up. In 97, I forgot to mention, it was them shopping in Millcote and dancing in the drawing room to a music box Rochester gives Jane. However, 73 has no score whatsoever, barring Jane going to Lowood. And so it can just make the series feel really dry at times. And there's way too much voiceover narration from Jane. So it sounds like you're trying to watch a play of Jane Eyre, but then someone's constantly trying to supplement the script with an audiobook. And this one does focus on the Christian elements, I think, a lot more. For example, Brocklehurst and the doctor are seeing all the girls take ill with typhus. And the doctor says a committee should be appointed, Mr. Brocklehurst, led by men with much more Christian principles. And you see his face fall, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah. And at the very end, when Jane and Rochester are driving in a carriage as husband and wife, the very last line is, God has tempered justice with mercy. But what's ironic is in this adaptation, it's unclear to me whether Jane forgives Mrs. Reed or not. She just says, poor suffering woman. She probably still hates me even though she's dying. All right. Our number one adaptation is, drumroll please, Plot twist, a tie between the 1983 miniseries and the 2011 movie. 1983 met most of the things I had in my vision for a Jane Eyre adaptation. Lots of dialogue from Bronte, a dynamic Rochester who is not afraid to weep his heart out during the breakup scene, etc., etc. This is an 11-part miniseries that's 5.5 hours long in total, and so I like to call this one the Spark Notes Jane Eyre. But it also makes you wonder, how much do you actually need to cover when adapting a work of literature to the screen? And they have 2 whole episodes dedicated to Jane's childhood, and yet they cut out Helen Burns's death. And I think that's a very important scene to include, because part of the reason Jane grows up to be the faith-filled and resilient young woman that everyone knows and loves is because Helen taught her all these lessons and introduced her more deeply to the Christian faith. And the death scene is Helen departing to Jane, the reminder that there's another life after this one, where there's no pain and no suffering, and where we will finally be reunited with God. And also, they have music at the wrong times. I mentioned before, I don't like when they have loud music that you can clearly hear playing during the scene where they put out the fire in Rochester's room. And in this one, Jane runs to Mr. Rochester, wakes him up, and as soon as he bolts out of bed, trumpet music starts playing, and he basically sort of puts out the fire himself while Jane's just standing there freaking out. And it cracks me up because I'm like, what's going on? What's with the trumpet music? Just stop! And there was no music for the proposal scene. And I think they should have had it because it's supposed to be the scene that goes on a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Jane thinks she's about to lose everything. Plot twist, Rochester actually loves her. Jane, will you marry me? Yes. So far, so good. And I mean, also, it didn't even rain, so it takes away some of the natural drama. And regarding 2011, my opinion of this film, like the portrayal of Michael Fassbender, that Michael Fassbender gave Mr. Rochester, drastically changed with viewing one and viewing two. I was disappointed the first time I watched it, but then after I watched 1983, I went back and watched this film and realized it's actually amazing. This film actually tells Jane's story through a series of flashbacks. It starts with her running away from Thornfield, and while she's becoming the school mistress at the school St. John starts, we see the pieces of her life come together. And so finally, when we get to the whole breakup thing and botched wedding, it plays the exact same music, exact same shots you see at the very beginning of the film, and you realize, oh, that's what that business of the girls wandering the moors at the beginning was that we were all wondering about. So it can be confusing for those who don't know the story, but from an artistic standpoint and from a way of trying to grab the audience right from the start and pull them into the story is a great tool. And 2011 is just a very well done film artistic wise. The cinematography is so beautiful. The costumes are very well designed. And the score is so good. I like to listen to it sometimes when I'm doing watercolors, and they have this violin suite that sort of becomes Jane's theme song. You can hear it playing at the beginning, and they also play it, for example, when she is engaged to Rochester and other places like that. And I really like the engagement montage in this one as well. You have her and Rochester delighting in the cherry blossoms. Jane takes a look at her wedding dress, and Jane is trying to draw a picture of Rochester, and he keeps trying to steal peeks at it before she's finished. But because they're trying to condense this 19-hour book with all these details to it into only 2 hours, there was a bunch that got cut. And one of the key scenes is Adele's backstory. It was a deleted scene, but they didn't put it in the final film. And the ending is very abrupt. She finds Mr. Rochester in the gardens of Thornfield. It's like, hey, I'm back, Edward. End of movie. And first time I watched it, I was like, that's it? And even now, I think great film overall, and then just kind of tanked at the end. And that concludes my Jane Eyre adaptations video. Thank you everyone for watching this. I will be out with a sequel video in a little bit. And once again, happy birthday to you, Charlotte Brontë, and thank you for writing such an amazing story. God bless y'all. Bye.